Thanks for tuning in to the Football Talk Squadron. I'm Dutch.
And I'm Maul.
And we'll see if his internet connection lasts this time. I think last time you were going through the apocalypse down in...
It was just a bad luck day.
We got the rest of the draft. The draft just went live about an hour or two ago. So
still did better than the Browns or the Jets ever have. So
oh my gosh. And as we're going to talk about today, the Titans. We're discussing AFC South teams, and just like the offseason, as we have been doing for the AFC East and the NFC North and the AFC North, we've wrapped up those who are on to the South teams, which honestly have been, I'd argue, pretty poor in both NFC and AFC the last few years.
Oh, yeah.
Outside of Tom Brady going to the South, like, it's not a lot to brag about. But before we get into it, I'll give you the option. So you can either go past and present, and I've got two players, or if you think that you can name the 9 running backs who have scored more than 100 touchdowns in their career, I'll give you that one.
Ooh, just because I'm always running back bias. I'll try to go with that one.
All right. So this is what I'll do. Instead, because I think the team would be too much of a hint, I can give you their college if you can't get them. But do you have any guesses right off the bat? And I'll tell you where they fall on the list.
Okay, let's go. Emmitt Smith.
Emmitt Smith is number 1, 164 touchdowns.
Barry Sanders.
Barry Sanders is not on the list. He's just off. He scored 99.
All right. Frank Gore.
Frank Gore is not on the list.
Wow. Let's see. Adrian Peterson.
AP is number 4 at 120.
Jim Brown.
Jim Brown's number 6, 106.
Walter Payton.
Walter Payton's number 5 at 110.
Eric Dickerson.
Nope, not on the list.
Derrick Henry.
Nope, he's not close yet, I don't think.
Let's see. I know I'm missing
all the guys remaining are not active.
Yeah, I kind of figured it was going to be a lot of old guys just because it's just harder to get that many.
One of these old guys you should know.
Mark Allen.
Thank you. 123 is number 3. So you missed a number 2, then 7, 8, and 9.
2, 7, 8, and 9. All right. Let's see. Thurman Thomas.
Nope.
Let me think a little bit here.
I want you to one guy. So 3 of these guys we saw play, 1 we did not. Do you want to have the college of the guy that did not?
That we didn't see play?
Yeah.
Sure.
Kansas. There's 2 guys. I'll tell you one of them who's not it, which is Gale Sayers.
I knew he wasn't on the list, even though he's like one of my top favorite running backs. Just he didn't play long enough, and behind Walter and all that. So
the other guy had a nickname that was an engine.
The engine?
The nickname was the Diesel. He was Diesel.
Ooh, I don't know that one.
Played for a team that no longer has their own name. It's a different team name now.
I said Eric Dickerson. Earl Campbell.
Now I'm talking about the Redskins.
Oh my gosh. I know it's right on the tip of my tongue.
White guy.
I know, white guy. Oh my gosh. Riggins?
Yes, John Riggins.
Okay.
Riggins is number 7 at 104. So you're missing number 2, who's got 145 touchdowns, and number 8 and 9, who are tied for 100 each.
I feel like 8 and 9 are going to be kind of, but I'm embarrassed that I don't know 2. 2 seems like it should be obvious.
2, when I tell you it, you'll be mad.
LT?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so number 8 played on a pretty legendary team that had a nickname around this team about how good they were offensively. Number 9 went to my school.
All right, Marshall Falk.
Yes is number 8.
Your school, like the team you root for, or your
Yeah.
school?
Yeah,
Okay.
Alabama.
Can't be Sean Alexander, can it?
It is
No
Sean
way.
Alexander.
Wow, I did not know.
Right. Yeah, I thought that would be the tricky one, but yeah. I was more surprised there was only 9 guys that scored 100 rushing touchdowns or more. Like, and that Barry wasn't on the list. That was the real kicker for me. I've got the list. You brought up Barry had 99. I was curious. Frank Gore is tied for 20th at 81.
I picked him just because I thought you play
Longevity.
that long.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you play that long, you're bound to get it.
Yeah. But some heavy hitting names, none of which are in the AFC South.
Yeah.
Which is for when I was thinking about this episode, when Pops was like, "Hey, I'm not going to be on," and you were on, I was like, the thing that I was like reminded of, especially like going through the Titans and the Jags and some of these teams. I remember when we were up in Atlanta, and you asked the question, you're like, "Hey, name the best like quarterback, running back, wide receiver to ever play for like each team," and we were going back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd get to some of these teams, and you're like, "Dude,
they
don't have anybody." Like, and they did have like some good players. Like, don't get me wrong, Fred Taylor for the Jags was really, really good. But outside of him, you're like wide receiver. It's like, I don't know where you go. Like Keenan McCardell. Like, it's tough.
Andre Johnson.
Yeah. But the Texans at least have like Andre and D-Hop.
Yeah.
The Titans got old D-Hop and Calvin Ridley, who they paid what I find funny. I guess we can get right into the Titans since they're bottom of the barrel. I find it funny that the Titans paid Ridley the amount of money that A.J. Brown wanted to be paid a few years ago, and instead they traded him.
Yeah, and they're getting a post-prime Calvin Ridley when they literally had A.J. like pre-prime, basically. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like, the Titans have, for me, and I know that I consistently hate on the Titans, it's because they make such terrible player management decisions.
Well, I mean, and these are those kinds of things when it's like, well, why can't teams win Super Bowls, or like, why can't they ever make? It's like these decisions, they kind of get, not brushed under the rug because everybody's gonna, tell them how bad of a decision these things are, but like they kind of go by the wayside when we get into like a serious discussion of like why these teams don't win Super Bowls, right? Because they always look at like the current team, like in its makeup right now, and like what pieces are they missing. And it's not that like, I mean, these guys are talented. Like everybody has talent besides Kadarius Toney in the NFL, but it's decisions like this that lead to, it hampers the teams in the future, that prevent them from being able to build these teams, and that ultimately is what comes down to their missing piece. It's not any one quarterback or the coach or anything like that. I mean, sometimes that happens, but like it's just bad management that prevents a lot of these organizations from going to the next step.
100%. And I know you, or I guess we, talked about Vrabel. I know that he's viewed, I don't want to say lovingly by us, but also not like disparagingly either. And I just say that because I think that the defense was a lot better because Vrabel was the head coach than what it's going to be this coming year. Like Vrabel was dealing with unwanted items in the kitchen and was still making a pretty good meal with defense.
It's funny you bring that up because personally, like I always would blame Vrabel for stuff. Like I was just like, man, Vrabel is an idiot, or like Vrabel did this, or like what is Vrabel doing? And like now that they finally got rid of him, and I'm kind of like looking forward to like what the Titans do have now, I'm like, they need Vrabel back because he wasn't really the problem.
Yeah, I mean, I look at the offseason signings. I got the list up in front. They signed Mason Rudolph, who I guess they just wanted a QB with CTE to figure out how he will play in Tennessee. Tony Pollard, who I think we had high hopes for last year in Dallas, and just when given the starter role, didn't live up to the billet.
Which, I mean, if you look at Tony Pollard like in a scope, you're like, he's not bad, right? Like you're not mad about that signing. But when you take a step back and you go, you're replacing Derrick Henry with a clearly not proven Tony Pollard, that's when you're just like, man, what a step backwards.
I feel like that scene in Step Brothers. So he's like, "What? Sounds as a person." They get Calvin Ridley. They sign some guys, Kenneth Murray, a linebacker from the Chargers. They signed some guys like here and there. No really big names outside of Tony Pollard and Calvin Ridley and Rudolph, which I talked about. I mean, I look at this season upcoming. Yes, they'll have D Hop. Yes, they'll have Calvin Ridley, but I don't think that makes up for the fact that you still have a second-year guy in Will Levis who, although did have like a really good game, that first game where he threw 4 touchdown passes, from then on out, it was a struggle. And I don't necessarily see that changing for the Titans over the course of 1 year, especially just with their track record of they can't really pick guys in the draft that hit.
Yeah, they're not in a good spot. That's for sure. Awuzie is they signed Awuzie, which that's going to help in their secondary. But you're right. They don't have like a ton of hope going forward. Like they don't have this like the only thing they really have is adding Calvin Ridley to offset D Hop. That'll help both of them, which then in turn helps Will Levis being that second year guy. Like Will Levis is kind of their only wild card of like it could possibly still work out okay, which brings me to my point if we want to move on to the Jags of like I think the Jags are almost in a worse place than the Titans are. Like as bad as we think the Titans are right now, like think about where the Jags are at. Like you know what you got with Trevor Lawrence. And as much as they want that to be really, really good, I mean, history has proven that it's just not, regardless of who you put around him, right? I mean, like that was always the thing of like, oh, if we could surround him with talent, you know, we could turn these guys into these superstars. Last year was probably the most talent that the Jags have ever had around one of their quarterbacks. You know what I mean? Like if they could go to the playoffs with Blake Bortles, but then can't go to the playoffs with Trevor Lawrence, I mean, I'm sorry. You know what I mean? Like you're stuck in that situation, right? Now they lose one of their good weapons in Calvin Ridley. Like at least the Titans have like a little bit of hope of like Will Levis still could possibly turn out to be okay. Like they don't have that in Jacksonville. Jacksonville is just like we got what we got, and they didn't make any super good signings to like.
You don't like Mac Jones?
Yeah, right. I mean, sweet, you picked up a worse backup guy.
Yeah, they did go out and get Gabe Davis, who Gabe, I would argue, is sort of like Calvin Ridley. He's shown flashes of like being really good, but then there's a lot of times you're like, dude, Gabe Davis was nowhere to be found.
Dude, I mean, yeah, like that's the you can't rely on Gabe Davis. Like even in the the Bills, which he had Josh Allen as a quarterback, and Josh Allen is a way better quarterback than Trevor Lawrence is. Gabe Davis, you're right, very talented, has these games where it's like 9 catches for 178 yards and 3 touchdowns, and then the next 2 weeks it'll be zeros and 1 target for 10 yards. You know what I mean? It's like you can't rely on that. You know what I mean? Like I think Calvin Ridley, it was more consistent than Gabe Davis, even though Trevor Lawrence, Calvin Ridley was not Trevor Lawrence's favorite target. That went to
Christian
Kirk. So maybe Gabe Davis can I don't know, so show a little more consistency if he gets fed the ball. But like to me, they're both in bad situations. But I think honestly, the Jags are in a worse situation than the Titans are because they just don't have any hope of going forward. I mean, the last game of the season was like a clear what I feel like going forward is, right? I mean, like the Jags going into the season, even like the last 2 seasons, it was like it's the Jags conference to lose, right? Because everybody else was rebuilding or just terrible. The Jags were the only one with like all this talent. And we already mentioned it at the top of the show. Like the South has just been a dumpster fire of just like anybody can win. You could have a sub 500 record and still, be in the hunt kind of thing. And the Jags had it in the palm of their hand, and all they had to do was beat the Titans, who were like clearly
Terrible.
out. Yeah, terrible. They're clearly out. They knew Vrabel's gone. Like all this stuff's going against them, and then they couldn't even pull it out, and they lose, and they stay home for the playoffs. Like if that doesn't just give you like a foreshadowing of what your future is like with this current makeup of the team, like I'm sorry, Jags fans. Like,
Well, that game really highlighted your comments that you made in the middle of the season that Lawrence was mid. Because in that game, like I still remember he misses Calvin Ridley's running down, the middle of the field, overthrows him for 6, like in the fourth. Like the Jags have a chance to take the lead. Then the Jags go for it on 4th and 4, and he just overthrows a wide open receiver. And I get that quarterbacks miss those, but at the same time, like I go back to the Super Bowl. Like that was the big thing when my dad was like, "What do you think?" And we both were on the same, and I think all of us were on the same like opinion that it's like if you said, "Hey, Mahomes has got the ball with less than 2 minutes to go," you either have to put your house on him to win or lose. Which one are you doing? It's like I'm going to put it on him to win. It's like it's simple as that. Like in with Purdy, I'm going to bet on him to lose. Trevor Lawrence, ball in his hand, yeah, I double it down that he's going to lose the game for him. Like,
yeah.
And that's what I think the bigger emphasis of your point is like I think the Jags are in a worse position because this hope that you talk about is the fact that they hope that Lawrence is going to be this guy. And the fact is they're going to pay him like it here next year. And he ain't it. Like, he's not the guy that you've watched in games that you're like, dude, Lawrence was absolutely slinging it. Like, they just need to get him more weapons. Like, they did that. It didn't work.
Yeah.
Like,
and again, looking at like who they've signed and brought back or whatever for this year, like a couple okay names, but again, no like game breakers where all of a sudden you're like, that is going to change the makeup of the team. Like Darnell Savage is decent in the secondary.
Eric Armstead.
Ronald Darby's decent in the secondary. Eric Armstead is decent on the O line. They franchise tag Josh Allen, which again, Josh Allen is kind of like he's had good years. I feel like he's never really fully lived up to his potential, but other than that, like they're not getting any game busters. You know what I mean? Like there's no game breakers on that list, and the Jags are going to be basically the same team they were last year, if not maybe even slightly worse, which was a non-playoff making team. So where do you go from there?
Exactly. And it's like, I know we talked about these teams sort of in order of, you look at the Titans, how bad they were. The Jags still got beat by them. The Jags, you're sitting here and you're like, well, this was supposed to be their year last year. And then you look at these other two teams that we have to talk about with the Colts and Texans, and you're like, dude, like I get the Colts are going to have more questions because Anthony Richardson didn't get to play a whole year. We saw a lot of flashes. And I think the bigger thing for me in the Colts as we sort of transition that is they have a coach that showed that with a backup quarterback in Gardner Minshew, who had been around the league, that he pretty much made them a playoff team.
Yeah.
Like, and they beat good teams.
I mean, if you look at it, like we'll talk about here in a second how good the Texans look and how good they're going to be. At the end of the season, the Colts had the game on the line. And I mean, they really should have. I don't know if they would have won the game, but they should have converted that 4th down at least. That would have probably let them beat the Texans. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, like, they're there, right? And you talked about it with the coach. I'm going to go even a little bit further with Gardner Minshew. I think Gardner Minshew is a fine backup. And, like, if there was somebody who, when you have your starter go down to run your team, he's fine, but I think that speaks more to how good that team could be with a healthy Anthony Richardson. I mean, I'll admit at the beginning of last season, I was an Anthony Richardson hater. Everybody was talking about like how he had all these intangibles and how good he was going to be. And I was just like, I don't see it. Like he wasn't that good in college. He's not going to all of a sudden be this amazing pro. And he surprised me. He was doing really well up until he got hurt. And then Minshew comes in and they still do really well, which again, you can give some of the credit to Minshew, but that you obviously have to give a lot of the credit to the team around him that they're still able to pick up the rest of that slack. And they re-signed Michael Pittman, who's obviously a big body receiver that they love. So if they get a healthy Anthony Richardson back, I mean, I think the Colts are in a good spot.
The Anthony Richardson healthy back is like my biggest. It's almost like a red herring where it's just like, I've seen quarterbacks. RG3 is the prime example. That's like, hey, he gets hurt because he's a runner. Like, and it's just, I think that we've talked about this before. It's so, how do I want to say it? Bad luck, bad genetics, like whatever you want to call it, that a guy who clearly has like these intangibles, RG3 had it too. Like, hey, he was incredibly fast, like looked amazing in college. Anthony didn't have those those moments in college like RG3 did. I mean, RG won the Heisman, but then they get into the league and it's like, dude, it's just a different speed. Like
your fragility doesn't hold up to the NFL speed and strength.
Yeah.
Like, Hunter Henry's a perfect example too. Like, dudes clearly are talented, but they just, when they get hit by bigger, faster, stronger men, they break down quicker.
Yeah.
Which is understandable, but again, that's part of the the NFL. Like, you got to be. That's why, like, what Tom Brady did was so amazing, because he was so old, playing for so long, still getting hit and getting back up.
Oh, for sure. Like those are the things that I'm sorry, there's no combine, there's no test that's really going to give you the prediction of whether this guy's going to make it for 3 years, much less Tom Brady doing it for 20.
Yeah, that's like a DNA thing that it just, you can't test that.
Yeah.
But to counter your point, just in case Richardson does go down again, they got Flacco as a backup. So, I mean, take that for what it's worth.
I'm a big believer, because we've been sort of talking about it. You mentioned it when we were doing our franchise QBs, and I think this is like a good team that really brings out this point. Tom Brady talked about it this offseason. I'm sure you probably saw the clip where he's like, yo, quarterbacks aren't playing as well as previous. And I put way more of it on coaching than I do the guys coming out of college. Like, I think that this guy, it's clear that the Eagles had a huge drop off in offensive production when the coach of Indianapolis left. And Indianapolis has this resurgence of the position of quarterback, even through a backup in Gardner Minshew. And for me, that speaks volumes. Like, especially for, you look at the Titans, they go out and get an offensive minded coach from Cincinnati. It's one of these ones where it's like, as important as it is to draft well, you better have the guys in place to develop these players correctly. Absolutely. Because if you don't, dude, I don't care who you draft. Yeah. Like, that's the Jets, that's the Browns, that's the Titans.
It's the Matt Nagy effect.
Somewhere Pops is throwing up right now, hearing it in third person. It's true. Like, I sit back and I look at it and I go, and I see it with the Colts having their resurgence, and then you look at the Texans. It's like, it was clear. We talked about it at the beginning of last season, that there are coaches that when you get hired, you're like, they pretty much had the same team. Now I get they got their quarterback in CJ Stroud, but you look at it and you're like, dude, this is a different ball team. Mm-hmm. Like, they played completely different than they played last year. And I'd give the hand to the Colts and to the Texans in that. I think what's more surprising is the fact that the Jags can't do it with Doug Peterson.
Yeah.
Like, there's so many.
I think he's a good coach. I felt, if you would have asked me point blank, is he good or bad, I would put him in the good camp.
Yeah. I think my question, it's one of those ones that I doubt we'll ever get the answer to, is what happened in Philly. Like, what led to that breakup of the first coach to ever win you a Super Bowl, and 2 years later he's gone. And it's just like, and now you're sort of seeing the exact same setup with Sirianni.
Your head coach and your starting quarterback are all of a sudden like league busts.
Yeah.
Like, how does that happen?
Exactly. So I feel like Peterson will get the blame. I know we're going sort of back to Jags. I feel like he'll get the blame for Trevor Lawrence. Like if Trevor Lawrence comes out and sucks it up again this year, they're going to be like, it's coaching. And it's like, get a feeling it's probably more. He made Carson Wentz look real good for a year.
Yeah.
Like people forget about that. So, but for the Colts, like the other thing that I think it will be an undervalued move of them losing Zach Moss. Like he ran the ball really well with Jonathan Taylor out.
Yeah.
I get Jonathan Taylor's back, and he had some flashes, but at no point did he look like the guy he was 2 years ago. That's just.
Yeah, it definitely took him a little bit to get back into the swing of things, which again was kind of tricky to judge because it was like not mid-season, but it wasn't the whole season, that we got to see.
Yeah.
I think a lot of that though was him like sitting out, or he was hurt for a while. So if he can stay healthy in training camp and just start the season and get the full off season of work, like he's still young enough that I think they're fine in that position for sure.
And I know that we went defensive with the corner for the Colts. The more and more I look at their free agents and who they have on the team, like I would not be surprised to see them go get a wide receiver if one's available. Like whether it be Adonai Mitchell, Xavier Worthy, like maybe they go out and get the speed guy to take the top off defenses in Indy. That's the only thing that I look back for the Colts. It's like, hey, I think that they have their quarterback in Anthony Richardson. I think that they like what they saw last year. You got to put some more weapons around him. Yes, they bring back Michael Pittman, but outside of him, I'm sort of like, I don't know anybody. Like they're not they're not wowing me with the names. Even like under Peyton, like he had Reggie Wayne, Marvin Harrison, even like I remember
Clark.
Yeah. Oh, dude, Dallas. What I brought that up the other day to this guy I was flying with. He was an Iowa fan. And I was like, who's the first Iowa tight end that started on? He's like, Dallas Clark. And I was like, dude, that warmed my soul that you knew that. Like, even some of the guys, I remember one of the guys, he'll probably be a subject of CTE in the future. He had like 5 concussions, but he was talented wide receiver. Remember Austin Collie?
Yeah.
Dude, that dude was a baller. Pat McAfee had one of the best stories I've ever heard about him. Did you ever hear that?
Mm-mm.
Him and Peyton. So I guess they're in a game, and it's like Austin's like rookie year. He's having like a really, really good year. Like he's a stud. Pat's like everyone on the team recognizes like this is that guy. He's really good. He runs like a 10-yard out, and Peyton throws it to him. He reaches out with one hand and he drops it. Well, he starts like jogging back to the huddle, and Peyton is just standing there pointing, like, get out. It's so he like runs over to the sideline. The coach is like, we ain't taking it out. Go back in. And when he like tries to go back in, Peyton points him back off again. And so he like comes back out, and he's like sitting next to the Pat on the bench, and Pat's like, what happened? Like, why are you not playing? He's like, Peyton told me to get out.
Peyton won't let me play.
Yeah, Peyton won't let me play. And so I guess like Peyton came over to the sideline and was like, if I throw you the football, you go get it with 2 hands. We're not here for show. We're going down to get points. Like I can't have you trying to showboat. And he's like, that's who Peyton was. Like Peyton was so serious during the games. Like, no, if I throw you the ball, you do everything in your ability to catch it. I don't care how good you look. Like it's about moving the football down the field. And Pat's just sitting there. He's like, glad I'm punting.
Yeah. Glad I used my feet.
Oh my goodness. That legacy of the Colts is something I think they're going to try to bring back with just like they need an offense. Like I think their defense has shown promise the past few years, but from an offensive, perspective, after Manning left, they had some good times with Luck. Never could keep him healthy. They got to help Richardson. That's my biggest thing for the Colts going forward. But brings us to the last team, Houston Texans. So I'll ask you straight up. You can have Devin Singletary or you can have Joe Mixon. Who are you going with?
I mean, I'm going to take Joe Mixon. I know he's kind of getting up there in years. Um, and he's never really, from a fantasy standpoint, he's been fine. From an actual running back production standpoint, it's been hit or miss. I like to blame that though on like the Bengals and just the way that they've had teams. Like they've been good, don't get me wrong, but I think we can both agree that their O-line has been always suspect, right? And like I don't care how good of a running back you are, like unless you're Barry Sanders, which neither one of those dudes are, you need a line to run the ball, right? And like that, and then they go and get Joe Burrow, which is great. And usually a good running game or a good passing game can kind of help feed the other. But the way that the Bengals, I feel like, called games sometimes was it was like they felt like they had to prove Joe Burrow was their guy. And it was just like, we're going to make him throw the ball 50 times a game, which isn't bad, right? Like, Joe Burrow is clearly talented. And, like, sometimes that's fine. But if the teams know, like, they're going to throw the ball every single time, like, the running back isn't necessarily doing anything. So it's a tough decision, but I like Joe Mixon for the fact that if they can run a good balanced offense and they have a good offensive line, I think Joe Mixon can have more production than Devin Singletary.
I agree. The only guy that I would even moderately compare him to is like Austin Eckler, sort of in the same boat of like, I think
Mixon
also,
or
yeah,
Singletary?
Mixon.
Okay.
Like, I think that both of them got some looks because of fantasy. I think Mixon's a way better running back than Eckler was. I think Eckler got so many more targets in the passing game that like people thought like, oh, he's this amazing back because he scores all these fantasy points. But in which I think you're spot on, like where the Bengals changed once Burrow started throwing for like 400-500-yard games, the Bengals offense took off. Like that's what that offense is predicated on, like big shots down the field, move the ball quickly. That's how the Bengals do it. And at the end of the day, like it didn't matter who they could have had Barry Sanders in the backfield, like they weren't throwing it to him. Like they had Boyd, they had Higgins, and they had Chase. Like they were spreading it out to those guys. Every once in a while he caught a pass, but he was never really that pass catcher. He is a running back though.
He could be a pass catcher, and that kind of goes to my point is like I feel like they never used Joe Mixon to like his full potential. Now, I could end up eating my words, next if they try to make him the guy again because he's kind of getting up there in years, so there's going to be this like natural degradation. But like Joe Mixon to me had like the potential of kind of like a Le'Veon Bell type back, like kind of big but not huge, but like still small enough to be really elusive if you gave him the ball in space, which they just never did in Cincinnati, right? But the reason why Le'Veon Bell was so good is because they had that offense that was so well balanced with Big Ben and AB and then Le'Veon Bell out of the backfield, which the Bengals just went all on Joe Burrow. You know what I mean? So like I think with CJ Stroud being now a clear weapon that the defensive have to guard, if they can balance out using Stroud and Mixon out of the backfield, I think, again, I would probably rather have Mixon.
And Mixon, I think it's easy to say more in terms of like a true starting running back. Singletary's had multiple opportunities, never really been able to carry that load. I forget what the guy's name is that they had behind him in Texas that came out of Florida that had a really good year.
Dameon Pierce?
Dameon Pierce. Like he had a good year 2 years ago, and I think a lot of people thought he was going to be the starter. Then they just sort of split. I think it pays teams to have a Mixon where it's like, this is our number one guy. Like when we need, it's like Christian McCaffrey. Like when we need a guy, we're handing the ball. This guy's going to get us the 2-3 yards that we need.
Well, and I mean that's a good point too that I didn't bring up. There's been, so many times where you have a running back who's clearly talented, but he's always kind of been the backup, and he's a great backup. But then when the starter leaves and you think like, all right, now this guy gets to fully shine. You feel like he never got to shine because he was always a backup. For some reason, when he's the starter, just can never get it going. Like Tony Pollard is a perfect example, right? Tony Pollard behind Zeke was just like, dude, feed Tony Pollard. He's the better back. Then they get rid of Zeke. Tony Pollard's the starting guy. Yeah, nothing. Alexander Madison, another perfect guy. It was like basically Dalvin Cook 2.0. And then they get rid of Cook. What's Alexander Madison do as a starter? Nothing. You know what I mean?
Fumble.
Like there's been so many guys like that throughout history. Alfred Morris, another one, just like clearly a talented dude, but whenever he got the shot at the number one spot, just couldn't handle it. I think Devin Singletary kind of falls in that category. He's a great change of pace guy and be a great backup to Joe Mixon, but like Joe Mixon's got to be their guy.
It's almost like he needs another horse to run against to like push him, but when he doesn't have that other horse pushing him, it's like he just doesn't produce. So, I mean, I look at the offense. They get Tank Dell back. I think re-signing Dalton Schultz was huge.
Yep.
Like having a good tight end, the Kansas City Chiefs prove it for the past 2 years that we can lose our number one wide receiver. We're still back-to-back Super Bowl champs because we have a tight end that no one can figure out how to cover. Not saying Dalton Schultz is that guy, but he's better than I'd say half the teams out there.
Oh yeah,
with their tight end positions.
Such a thin position as far as like really finding good, solid guys. Like when you have a guy like that, like you gotta hold on to him, and they did, which was huge.
And then I look at their I'm looking just at their list. Defensive lineman Autry, defensive lineman Edwards, defensive lineman Settle, defensive lineman Fatuskia. Yeah, I'm gonna mispronounce that all day long. They go out and get Danielle Hunter.
Dude, big signing there.
Yes. Linebacker Al Shazier, linebacker Phillips, cornerback Ford, cornerback Johnson, Desmond King, Jeff Okuda, safety Murray. Like that for me gives a lot of hope because like they had a good defense last year with, I would argue, the Aldis of shopping at foods. And now he's getting to pick better players and build his own team. Like I'm excited what D'Amico Ryans does next year. And when you look at it, it's like, well, Titans, he'll beat them. That shouldn't be a problem. Colts, we'll see how Anthony Richardson does, but they don't really have a lot of threats. And the Jags, we don't know how they are. So for me, this is sort of exactly what it was last year for the Jags.
For the Jags, yeah.
It's this year for the Texans. I think
100%.
everyone expects the Texans to win. Can they meet expectations?
Yeah, I mean, if they can come in with a rookie quarterback, a new head coach, and win the division when it wasn't supposed to be won, now they're getting a full offseason together. They're getting more experience. D'Amico is getting his hands in guys that he wants. Like, and again, it's in a non-competitive division is like the biggest thing for me. You know what I mean? Like if you're playing in the AFC North where it's like all four teams could be playoff bound, like then it's a different story. It's like, do those additions really mean that much? But in a division where it's just like, I could see all but one team being sub 500, like write the check. You know what I mean? Now that could be what the Jags' downfall was, but like I don't see D'Amico and CJ letting that happen. So to me, it's a clear-cut winner for them. The Colts are really, I think, their only true test, and they're still a wild card depending on like how Anthony Richardson stays healthy.
The biggest threat to the Texans, and I think that you'll probably agree, it's outside. Like, I mean, the AFC is stacked.
Oh yeah,
with quarterbacks. I mean, you look at the West, it's clear cut. You got Mahomes, you got Herbert. We'll see who the Broncos and the Raiders. Right now, the Raiders have Minshew, but they're probably going to draft. AFC North, you got Lamar, you got Burrow, you've got Watson and Russell Wilson or Fields, depending on how bad they both play. Eventually leads to the Steelers probably going their first under 500 season in forever. And then the AFC East, you got Tua, whoever the Patriots go get, Josh Allen, and Aaron Rodgers. And dude, the Jets are loading up. Like, I sort of feel bad. that me and Pops started recording this so early before the Super Bowl even finished, because now that free agency's hit, like, you called it. We'll see. I think your prediction is going to be probably the most true with the Jets going. Jets got all the pieces on the paper. Like, they're loading up. They're doing exactly what I think everyone was hoping they would do, which is build a team around Rodgers. And it was funny. I flew with a guy the other day that was like, "Do you think that's worth it to win one?" And I was like,
absolutely.
"Yes." Like, my answer to him was, "Do you think that some diehard Browns fan or Lions fan wouldn't sell their soul to have one in their lifetime?"
Absolutely, it's worth it.
Yes.
Absolutely.
They haven't been since Super Bowl III. Like, it's never, for them, that is like, people aren't even alive. Like, most people, you hear Joe Namath, it's like, cool, that dude's old. Like, you can't go find film on that guy. That was before it was even in color. Like, what do you want? So
that's if Rodgers doesn't win the VP or something like that.
Oh, dude, I saw this meme today that had me dying. It was like everyone on the Jets that they've picked up, and it's like, what's going to stop these guys? It was just a picture of MetLife Field.
I thought it was going to be RFK Jr.
Just the grassy knoll over in Dallas.
Dang.
Oh, is that too far? 50 years later? Okay. Still classified. But we found the line. But, I know that's sort of the teams. We're both leaning towards the Texans and going to that. I asked Pops this last week, and I know that we're going to try to do a free agency, but if we don't get the opportunity, I just know with everyone's schedules, it's pretty hectic. Who's the free agencies that you think this coming year will provide the most impact that have been signed so far? I know that's putting you on the spot.
Oh yeah, that's tough because I don't have my list in front of me. It's hard to really just shy away from the big names like Derrick Henry to the Ravens. I know it's like one guy, but I mean, just as impactful as that one dude could be to an already should have been Super Bowl bound team is could be their missing link there. I don't know. Give me some.
Well, here's the question: do you think Saquon makes that big of an impact with the Eagles, or like, how do you think that plays out?
I don't know, dude. I've said this before of like, I just feel like the Eagles always find a way to take like a really good running back and not utilize them appropriately, where like, again, even if Saquon was on that team now, like the way that they call their offense with the way Jalen runs and now they're losing Kelsey, which is a Hall of Fame center. Like, I mean, is Saquon good in the backfield? Obviously, like you're not going to not take Saquon in the backfield, but like, I don't think, again, like the running back wasn't the issue with the Eagles. It wasn't really about scoring points for them. Like it was their all-star defense that couldn't stop the Cardinals. You know what I mean? Like, and I don't know how you fix that with a running back. So
yeah,
yes, he'll be an impact. He'll be great. He's going to put up huge fantasy numbers probably, but like, I don't know. I don't think that's like what gets the Eagles over the hump. You know what I mean?
All right. So this is the other question. They go out, they sign DeAndre Swift, Keenan Allen, Gerald Everett. They put all the pieces around. They trade Fields. It's pretty much setting them up to take either Caleb Williams or do the most Bears thing ever and not pick him and like pick Drake May. If that happens, like I hope that I have a live feed of Pops because I want to watch that man go through all 9 stages of depression instantly. But I don't think that's going to happen. How do you think they've assembled the cast and the Bears for their rival CW?
Dude, I saw this the other day, so I'm stealing it, and it was just funny though because it was on like ESPN, and you could see the other like analysts their reactions when this guy said that Caleb Williams is like in the best spot a number 1 draft pick has like ever been in, and you could tell all the people were just like, what? Like, I think one guy just yelled, "Good grief!" like at the top of his lungs, like just because he's just like, "You're crazy." But then he kind of broke it down into all the things that you just talked about, like, and it's really, I mean, it really is setting up well for Caleb Williams. Well, in the sense that like he's not going to this absolute 2-15 garbage team. He's got all these weapons being assembled before he even gets there. And he's got a GM who like cares and is really trying to make a good team. Like it's setting up. It's not the Andrew Luck, you know what I mean? It's not the suck for luck where it's just like this terrible team and it's like, hey, dude, you got to turn us around. Like he's getting pieces. So he has the opportunity to really come in and have an amazing season. I'll say it with a double-edged sword because if he does come out and the Bears just continue to suck, like he's going to go down as the biggest bust in NFL history because of all of the expectation around him, right? Like the expectation was that he could go to any team and turn them around because of how good he is. Now he's going to go to a team that is like perfectly assembled for him. And so he better do well. Like
He better do well.
They better. It's hard to say that they better make the playoffs. I'll say that they better be in like very, very serious contention. Anything other than that, or if they're not in week 18 playing for a spot, they don't have to win it all. Like that's silly to say that they have to win it all. But if they're not in week 18, at least playing for a spot for a playoff, then it's a fail.
I think it's what we talked about on the franchise QB. I know we defined it, but I think also like we sit back and it's like it's something that you see. Like if he comes out in week 5, he's Sam Darnold. Like I'm seeing ghosts on the sideline, like looks awful. Like everyone in Chicago's gonna be like, dude, we did it again. Like it's one of those ones that I'm gonna agree with you up until the point of like I don't feel like they have to be in playoff contention. I just think that it's one of those ones that when you look at it, like no one questioned after Mahomes' first year that it was like they found their guy. Same with CJ Stroud. It's like I just want those same vibes that you look at the product that you're getting on the field and you're like, they found him. Like they have the guy they're going to build a team around. That's ultimately what you're seeing. And I think that's really evident. Like other guys, it's not. Like it's just one of those same with, I mean, ultimately that was the thing with Fields. Like I think he showed amazing athleticism, other things, but when I made the slide the other day of like the 5 quarterbacks that they've taken in the first round since Jim McMahon, Fields is one of them. He had a record of like 10-24.
Yeah.
Like
which it's hard to blame Fields entirely, right? Like there's like this weird dichotomy going on where it's like you either are like 100% a Fields fan and like he does no wrong. I feel like kind of the Pops group. Sorry, Pops. But then there's like the other fan, that's just like Fields is terrible and we got to get rid of him. I disagree. I think it's like somewhere in the middle. Like the Bears did not assemble a good enough team around Fields, so it's hard to win as that guy. However, there were also plenty of opportunities, especially this year, where like Fields had the ball in his hand to win the game and he just choked. So
yeah,
he had great flashes. Like there were like a 2 or 3 game stretch where you're like, dude, Fields is really heating up here. So it's kind of unfortunate for Fields because I feel like if they built this exact same team like that they're doing right now, that they're doing for Caleb Williams, if they draft Caleb Williams, and then you just plug in Fields, I think Fields has a much better showing than he did this last year. But it was kind of one of those like he's been given the opportunity and he still didn't come through. Like the Bears are not entirely not at fault, but at the same time, like they got to get something new in there. So again, I think I won't be a Bears fan, but I'm still going to be a Caleb Williams fan, and I think if he can come out and just not try to do too much. That was his problem at USC. Like he was always trying to do way too much, and I think if he could just come out and be the talent that he is, the Bears are really, really setting him up for success.
All right. So last big signing as I was dragging through, another quarterback. I think he goes to a team that has a ton of pieces. They have one of the most electric running backs in the league. They have a tight end that initially came out really hot, sort of fell off the past few years. They have a good wide receiver core. Talking about Kirk Cousins going to Atlanta. They got Kyle Pitts. They got Bijan Robinson. They have Drake London. They go out. They sign Darnell Mooney. They sign Ray McLeod. I think that they're sitting there at number 7 in the draft. They could easily go and add another defensive piece like we did in the draft. We took Dallas Turner, go in there, Pops did. Where do you think Kirk Cousins just sort of in this deal, how does this fold out with Atlanta?
I think it's great for Atlanta. Again, it's weird that it's both the South divisions that we talked about, like, but the NFC is just like the AFC. Like, I could see all but one team being sub 500. I don't know which team that is because I feel like that's just the way the NFC South always rolls. But like, if there was a division to be like not have all the pieces but just be good enough to really run away with it, like that's the division to be in, right? And Kirk has proven over the years that like he can do it. He really can. He's not going to be that like elite Hall of Fame level guy, but they don't need that, right? Like, and again, with all of the pieces around it, as long as he comes back healthy enough from the Achilles, like I think it's great for the Falcons because the Bucks are probably going to be their biggest test, but like the Saints are stuck with Derek Carr. I know they just signed Chase Young, but he's never proven really to be anything outside of his rookie year. I mean, the Panthers are just, I mean, they're falling apart. They're number 32 of 32 for sure in almost every category. Yeah. So, I mean, the Falcons, they've got the pieces there, and Kirk. If there was any one piece that prevented them from like really winning the division, because they were in it all the way up until the end. Now they were like a 500 team, so it wasn't special, but they had Desmond Ridder. You know what I mean? Like they were just all over the place with quarterback. So if Kirk comes in and is healthy from that Achilles, like I think they're going to do fine.
Yeah, well, that's perfect because next episode that we're recording is the NFC South, so we give you guys at home a little bit of a taste of what's to come, mainly with the Falcons. I think that the other 3 teams we'll talk about, it's more exactly what you sort of talked about. The Bucks got Mayfield. We'll see if he's able to keep that magic going for a second straight year. But then the other 2 teams in there, you're like, I hope that you're a diehard fan because it's going to take that being a diehard to get through these years that are coming up because it's going to be pretty bad. But outside of that, you got anything else before we wrap it up?
That's it.
All right. Well, thanks you guys for tuning in. Go to our TikTok, Instagram, follow us, subscribe on there, YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts for our podcast. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Time Pull Chalks.